Good evening to those joining us from our local time zone, and a warm welcome to all attending from around the globe. Esteemed audience, cherished guests, and fellow seekers of knowledge, welcome to this virtual space where knowledge, guidance, and inspiration converge. From the American University of Beirut, AUB, I stand before you humbled by the opportunity, with sense of wonder and cherished duty. It is with great honor and enthusiasm to welcome you to our gleaming latest mentoring talk, a guiding light of inspiration in our ongoing journey of transformative education, enlightenment, and empowerment. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest speaker, Professor Dame Sally Mapstone, for the 30th Mentoring Talk. The Mentoring Talks initiative is a central pillar of our transformative education thread drive at AUB. Professor Dame Mapstone is the principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University of St. Andrews in Scotland, a position she took up in 2016. During Dame Sally's tenure, the university attained a historic double first, ranking top of the two leading university league tables in the UK, the Times and Sunday Times Good University Guide 2024 and the Guardian University Guide 2024. At a national and international level, Professor Mapstone has served as the convener of University Scotland, Vice Chair of the Carnegie Trust for the Universities of Scotland, and as Chair of the International Advisory Board for the University of Helsinki. She is currently the Chair of the Higher Education Policy Institute Board, a trustee of the Europeum, a network of 18 leading European universities connecting students across disciplines, cultures, and countries. In August 2023, Professor Mapstone became the President of Universities UK, which consists of 142 universities in England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. As the Vice-Chancellor of the University of St. Andrews, Professor Mapstone has not only steered the institution to new heights of academic achievements, but also has championed inclusivity, innovation, and global collaboration. Her resolute dedication to education and research serves as an inspiration to us all. With her profound insights and boundless wisdom, Professor Mapstone is a guiding light in our journey of learning and growth. This mentoring talk is organized in partnership with the prestigious Angewandte Chemie. I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Suzanne Toby, Executive Editor of Angewandte Chemie, and Dr. Lauren Scholz, Deputy Editor of Angewandte Chemie, for joining us on this mentoring talk. Let us extend a warm salute to Professor Mapstone as we eagerly anticipate the invaluable lessons she will impart in today's mentoring talk. Please join me in welcoming Professor Mapstone to this enriching mentoring talk. Professor Dame Mapstone, the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much for that really warm introduction, and hello everybody wherever you are across the world. I really am delighted, just delighted to have the opportunity to take part in the American University of Beirut's Mentoring Talks initiative. The title of my talk this evening, The Importance of Having a Plan, stems from advice I often give to students and on the odd occasion colleagues at my university. And this advice centers on my own dislike of the phrase sounds like a plan, which is common parlance in emails and during meetings. The reason that I take issue with the use of sounds like a plan is because it is a phrase that signals assent, but also implies a relinquishing of agency, which, in my view, is counterproductive. Life, including your working life, is about making as well as taking chances. If there is a plan, it really ought to be yours. And should there be a plan? One often hears people in positions of power and influence talk about their lives and careers as a series of accidents. They will say that they had no plan, that things just fell into place. While this stance often comes from a sense of modesty, I think it is unnecessary, as well as being quite unhelpful to anyone who is hoping to learn from the success of others. So my own view is rather different. I think it is essential to take responsibility for what you achieve in life. Now, let me offer you a slightly counterintuitive example of this kind of approach, as expressed by Dr. Hannibal Lecter, Hannibal the Cannibal, in Thomas Harris's thriller from 1988, The Silence of the Lambs. Dr. Lecter puts it thus: "Nothing happened to me, I happened." While I am not, of course, suggesting that you take Dr. Lecter as your role model, his approach to taking action is preferable to that conveyed by "sounds like a plan." If you would prefer an example from someone who is not a serial killer, as far as I'm aware, perhaps we can turn to Iris Murdoch, an Irish and British political and philosopher and novelist, whom I consider one of my own role models. In a 1990 interview with the Paris Review, Iris described her method for writing a novel, and I'm quoting here: "I think it is important to make a detailed plan before you write the first sentence. Some people think one should write, 'George woke up and knew that something terrible had happened yesterday,' and then see what happens. I plan the whole thing in detail before I begin. I have a general scheme and lots of notes. Every chapter is planned, every conversation is planned." This is, of course, a primary stage. The second stage is that one should sit quietly and let the thing invent itself. One piece of imagination leads to another. You think about a certain situation and then some quite extraordinary aspect of it suddenly appears. Iris's level of planning is perhaps extreme. We do not have to plan every conversation that we have, although I would actually always recommend rehearsing the important ones, such as job interviews. However, what Iris's method reveals is that planning enables imagination. Having a plan makes our biggest goals seem possible, and consequently, we can then imagine even more ambitious goals. It is also my view that planning enables rather than hinders flexibility, because it makes you aware of your own capacity to act and to shape your life and career. Such flexibility is essential because life won't always give you what you want or think you want. Versatility, adaptability, invention, and self-scrutiny are vital skills that you must cultivate. On occasion, you will find that you start down one course of action or career only to decide to do something else. And in my view, that is fine, providing you are prepared to take the consequences and to do so positively. To give an example from my own experience, after I had finished my first degree in English language and literature at the University of Oxford, I decided to go into the publishing profession. I had a place to do a doctorate at Oxford, but I wanted to try out a career in publishing, and I am really glad I did. I worked for 3 years as an editor in one of London's biggest publishing houses, editing everything from a study of the diamond trade to the diaries of the eccentric British aristocrat Lord Longford. Ultimately, though, I decided to return to Oxford to do my doctorate in older Scottish literature. I see this career change as an integral part of my journey to where I am now. Little we do in life is wasted if we use it properly and if we can make it part of our plan. During my time in publishing, I learned a lot about business, a lot about people, and consequently, upon my return to the University of Oxford, I took a much more professional approach to the next phase of my life than I might have done otherwise. After my doctorate, I got a fellowship and a university lectureship in medieval English language and literature at Oxford, and that led me over the next quarter century to a series of academic positions, culminating in my appointment as Professor of Older Scots Literature. As I built up my experience in teaching and research, I was inspired by the transformative role that universities play in the lives of individuals as well as in society. It became evident to me that I could contribute to the future direction of the sector, so I set out to do just that. At Oxford, I started my journey into academic leadership, serving as university proctor in the 2006 to 2007 academic year, as Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Personnel and Equality from 2009 to 2010, and then as Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Education from 2011 to 2016. And these were key leadership positions in the university's most senior team, working with the Vice-Chancellor. Following this path meant taking positions and roles that were challenging professionally and socially. In my early days as an academic leader, it was completely the norm for me to be at meetings or events and to be the only woman in the room. Indeed, one of the key challenges was getting into the room at all and subsequently having my contributions respected. I responded to that with a commitment to persevering and proving the worth of my contributions, and my colleagues gradually realized that what I had to say was valuable, and indeed that the contributions of other women could be valuable too. But to prompt this realization, I had to be seen to take action. For example, when I was Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Education at Oxford, I went to a meeting in London chaired by the then Government Minister for Universities, Higher Education and Science, David Willetts. It was attended by many other members of the higher education sector. The meeting was held in a large, busy room. When I got there, I found it almost full, and the attendees were predominantly men in suits. These people were mostly sitting round a large oval table which dominated the room, and at the end of which the minister was seated. One of the male organisers saw me come in and started ushering me to a seat to the side of the room. So I said quite loudly, "No thanks, I'd like to sit at the table." At that point, several of the small number of women who were distributed across the room, most but not all sitting round the table, looked round at me and smiled. They clearly recognised that I was making a very literal reference to one of the tenets in Sheryl Sandberg's then very current book, Lean In. So this was in 2013, shortly after that book had been published. That to be in on the discussions, you need to be at the table and not sitting somewhere near the door or on the way to the toilets. So what happened was somebody moved up and I got my seat at the table. Now, what I hope you take from this story is that if you think you have a contribution to make, it is, in my opinion, incumbent on you to act. If I had simply let things happen, I would have found myself sitting in an obscure position at the side of the room. Of course, asserting yourself in this way can seem daunting, particularly if you belong to a minority group. However, it is essential, as is so brilliantly expressed by Michelle Obama, another woman from whom I draw so much inspiration, in her memoir, Becoming. Michelle, describing the time between her husband's election as president and his inauguration, writes, "I didn't want to go about any of it casually. I intended to arrive at the White House with a carefully thought out strategy and a strong team backing me. If I'd learned anything from the ugliness of the campaign, from the myriad of ways people had sought to write me off as angry or unbecoming, it was that public judgment sweeps in to fill any void. If you don't get out there and define yourself, you'll be quickly and inaccurately defined by others." So please take the time to think about who you want to be, how to define yourself, and what you want to do. Spend half an hour making a list of your broad objectives for the next 10 years. In 10 years' time, when you look at that note again, you will find it really interesting to review those outline plans, see what you make of them now that you've gone on to achieve things, and think about what you want to do next. Plans of this order don't have to be terribly detailed, but they do set key objectives, and there is something very empowering in doing that. You are in charge of your own destiny, so decide what you would like it to be and make a note of it. The power of planning can go far beyond the personal, however. I've often found throughout my career that demonstrating a capacity for making and executing plans can lead to a plethora of broader leadership development opportunities. For example, during my time as Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Education at the University of Oxford, I assumed responsibility for Oxford's teaching and education policies. Owing to my clear commitment to strategy and planning, which was recognised by my colleagues, I also obtained the opportunity to lead the creation of the university's strategic plan for 2013 to 2018. The experience of creating and implementing Oxford's strategic plan has since fundamentally shaped my time as Principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University of St Andrews. Here, I have retained my involvement in institutional planning through developing the university's strategy for 2018 to 2023, and then following revision during the pandemic for 2022 to 2027. Under the guidance and direction of our strategy, as you heard in the kind introduction, the University of St Andrews has come to enjoy its highest ever rankings in national league tables. We are currently ranked #1 in the two major UK league tables, the Times and Sunday Times Good University Guide 2024 and the Guardian University Guide 2024, the first time any institution has outranked the universities of Oxford and Cambridge in both of these tables in the same year. More importantly, however, our university strategy allows us as an institution to respond actively and cohesively to the most pressing social issues of our time, such as the climate emergency and the rapid rise of digital technology. Indeed, 2 of the 5 themes of our strategy are sustainable St Andrews and digital St Andrews. A focus on planning therefore means that the university can act effectively for the benefit of the many communities, local, national and global, that we serve. Being committed to always having a plan has therefore led to many personal and professional development opportunities for me, but it has also given me the ability to have an impact on a much larger scale as Principal and Vice-Chancellor. So what I would encourage you all to do is to generate your own plan, which works for you, but that crucially also speaks to the public good, to the benefit of the wider world. So please have a plan and act on it. Your strategy is what you make it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your inspiring remarks, Professor Mapstone. I will open the floor to questions. For the attendees, please write your questions in the Q&A box. Indicate what you are doing, where you come from. I'll be reading the questions and Professor Mapstone will answer. The first question is coming from Yara Faghali, biology student at AUB. How do you envision the long-term role of universities in current and future challenges?
Wow, that's a great question and a really, really provocative one. So thank you very much for that question. So first of all, I think that we must accept that universities have to change. Universities always have changed. The notion that universities remain the same for hundreds of years is incorrect. My university is over 600 years old. And during the period of its lifetime, it has frequently refreshed and restyled itself. And I regard it as essential that universities do that. Why is this so important now? Well, we live in a rapidly changing world, a world that is increasingly dominated by digital technologies, and that is confronting the most serious challenge of our lifetimes in the climate crisis. So universities need not only to be great survivors, they need to be engines and crucibles of ideas and change. And to that end, they need to be flexible and open to elements of reinvention. And I think that's the great thing about universities, that they are remarkably stable as an institution. If we try and think of other institutions that have lasted as long as universities, we'll often think about the church, politics, etc., very strong religions, strong national and global religions that have been around for as long as we can remember. Universities are in a similar, though not absolutely identical category. So they're great survivors, but they're characterized by the capacity to change. If, for example, we take university degrees, my very strong belief is that over the next 10 years, you will see many major international universities offering what is essentially a mixed economy, that they will still offer traditional undergraduate and postgraduate degrees at undergraduate level of 3 or 4 years in length, but that they will increasingly be offering shorter, modular courses to a much more diverse range of learners of all ages and coming from all parts of the world, frequently accessing learning online as well as in situ. So I think that universities will continue to play an incredibly important role as crucibles of ideas, engines of our economy and society, but that they will also, and that they must, reinvent themselves and adapt to the increasing changing needs of our global society.
Thank you. A comment by May Miqati, instructor of English here at AUB. She's referring to what you said, the idea of defining yourself before others define you or your role. She finds it quite interesting.
Yeah, it is. And of course, I owe that remark to the wonderful Michelle Obama, a woman I hugely admire, and a woman who has absolutely demonstrated in her life the capacity not to be defined by others, but to define herself as an intelligent, giving, encouraging woman who frequently also says that there's nothing wrong with hard work. I had the privilege of participating in an event which Michelle Obama participated in Oxford in 2012, when President Obama was visiting the UK. And Michelle Obama came to Oxford and did an interactive session with a group of young girls from actually a local school in London, who came up to Oxford to meet her and interact with them. And what she persistently said to them was, you must try to be the best you can be. Do not be defined by other people. Work out what you want to do and set about it yourself. But she did this with the most remarkable kindness, generosity, and humanity. And I'll just illustrate this for you. She was wearing the most wonderful outfit, a sort of white tunic and black trousers, and she's obviously a very striking woman. And these school children were mostly girls, and all from a kind of variety of backgrounds, but they'd all got very sort of done up to see Michelle Obama, and they're mostly about 12 or 13 or 14. And at the end of the session with her in this rather grand Oxford college, she just opened her arms and encouraged all these little girls to come and have a big group hug. And because they'd all dogged themselves up to see the president, as they sort of emerged from the hug, this wonderful white tunic that Michelle Obama was wearing was absolutely covered with bits of lip gloss and makeup and so forth. She didn't, I mean, her entourage looked horrified, but she didn't blink. What she wanted to do was to offer those girls the opportunity to see her as a role model and think about what they themselves could be. And if she got a bit covered in lip gloss, she didn't care. And I thought that was fantastic.
Thank you. This question is coming from Ahmad Akhdar. He's a medical lab science student here at AUB. What lessons has mentorship taught you in your life or career?
Oh, thank you, Ahmed. What a great question. I'm a huge believer in mentorship, both in terms of offering it and in terms of receiving it. So I'm an old person, but I still have a mentor, and I regard the opportunity to be mentored as absolutely enriching. And to that end, I have, both at Oxford and at St Andrews, I have championed mentorship schemes. I've run one in Oxford and one in St Andrews, and both of them are actually for women, for academic women in particular, at a certain level, to enable them to get up to the next level.
If I may, there is another question.
Yes, of course.
Probably you can answer. And
Yeah.
this question is coming from
Please
Dr.
do.
Brigitte Wex from Lebanese American University. I think she's talking about exactly what you were about to say. Thank you for your wonderful talk and sharing the idea of defining oneself. I'm interested in your mentoring scheme for senior women at Feminam. Mentoring for entry level finds a fertile ground, yet mentoring at the middle requires sensitivity. How did you galvanize support and rally potential mentees who are now being labeled senior women or in need of mentoring?
Thank you for coming in with that question, because I was just about to talk about that. So the Oxford scheme had this typical Latinate name, it being Oxford of ad feminam, you know, because it was sort of paying attention to the women. The scheme I run in St Andrews, I'll just briefly say, is called the Elizabeth Garrett scheme. It's named after Elizabeth Garrett Anderson, who in the 19th century was the first woman to qualify as a physician in the UK. She tried to qualify as a medic at the University of St Andrews, and she was initially admitted in 1861. But then it was realised that she was a woman, and her name was crossed out of the matriculation list, and she wasn't allowed to matriculate because of her gender. So I've called the mentoring scheme for women that we have at St Andrews after Elizabeth Garrett Anderson as a means of reminding ourselves of her and honouring her in the 21st century. So what I think I've really I have gained a great deal from mentoring, because I think it's an interactive process. You learn something about another person by really listening to them and encouraging them to talk through their plans and to make plans. You also inevitably in the mentoring process, whether as mentor or mentee, learn things about yourself, and there should be a kind of humility in that willingness always to learn. In terms of setting up a program for senior women, you're quite right that this does need to be undertaken with sensitivity, because women, of course, can feel, oh dear, I must need a mentoring program because I'm not very good. And my aim is always to say this is never anything remedial. It's not about not being any good. It's about wanting to be the best you can be. And it's about having an opportunity, which we all benefit from, to be, now mentoring can take many forms, but the simplest is two people, one's the mentor, one's the mentee. And it is really the opportunity for the mentor to hold the mirror up to the mentee. And it's the mentee who should make the running in the session, who should be, in an organized way, talking through themselves and their challenges. Many of the people that I have mentored, particularly women at a senior level, have been saying, I know I've got life choices coming up. Do I want to concentrate on being a researcher? Do I want to concentrate on playing a leadership role? Do I want to stay in this institution, or might I want to go to another? And many of those women will also be juggling choices about family and children at the same time. So the opportunity in a safe, quiet space to hear yourself talk, to be in a dialogue with somebody who is playing your choices back to you, I think is a gift that every institution should give to members of its staff. And that's why I champion and sponsor these schemes, because I do believe that if you run an institution, you are trying to draw out the best in everybody, and that the opportunity for people to experience mentoring is really one of the most effective and beneficial ways you can do that.
Thank you. This question is coming from Celine Mehdi. She is a senior biology student and she's minoring in women and gender studies. Her question is, what initiatives do you think can be done to advocate for diversity and promote intercultural dialogue?
Yes. What a great question. Again, thank you very much for that. And it's a very important question. I think a really crucial way to approach diversity and intercultural dialogue is to make sure that it is embedded. We can all undertake occasional initiatives. We can all have multicultural weeks and things of that sort. But actually, what really makes a difference is if your approach to diversity and dialogue is an embedded one. Again, I'm making myself sound like a person who, loves process and loves plans. But actually, I think that such things can actually help you establish a momentum in an institution. In my own institution, for example, in the UK, we have something, for example, called the Athena Swan scheme. And this is a charter scheme that is designed to encourage gender diversity and to promote the capacity for women to develop themselves. And it's a national charter mark, it's a recognised scheme. You can hold it at institutional level, or you can hold it at departmental level. And we have just put in our application for an institutional, there are 3 levels, bronze, silver and gold, silver award. We're also in the process of applying for something called the Race Equality Charter, which is another charter mark run across UK institutions. And the advantage of situating all your activities, the things you do that are going to make a difference to promote intercultural tolerance and understanding within some kind of charter or independently verified system, is that it makes you think about what you're doing. It makes you set yourself targets and kind of rate your activity. And at a given level, it makes you accountable out with the institution, because you will be being judged by those who are independent of your own university or college. And I do regard that as important. But having said all that, crucially, when I look at this from a leadership perspective, I think you have to set the tone from the top. And I'm always learning here. I'm very conscious of the fact that I've done in my lifetime, I hope, a great deal to promote diversity. But there is always more that I can do and should be doing. And again, I think there's a necessary humility that goes with that. One of the things that I've done here at the University of St Andrews is to create a post within my team, which is that of Vice Principal for People and Diversity. We didn't have that post before, but creating it gives it a kind of visibility that says the person that runs the institution cares about diversity, cares about people, and is prepared to put the university's resource into making that a key element of the university strategy. So now within our university strategy, we have 5 themes: world-leading St Andrews, digital St Andrews, entrepreneurial St Andrews, sustainable St Andrews, and diverse St Andrews. And by having that as one of our key driving university themes, we're saying this matters, we're going to measure it, and we're going to do things differently.
Thank you. There is a question that you already answered from Farah Shaib, senior nursing student. She's asking, how do you believe universities can foster diversity, equity, and inclusion? You just addressed that. A question from Thalia Husami, second-year chemical engineering student here at AUB. She's thanking you for your time. Her question is, how do you remain motivated in your role during times of adversity and crisis?
Yes. And I thank you very much for the question and for being on the call and having the courage to ask that question, because we all, don't we, in our personal lives can go through crisis and difficult times. And we've also all globally, obviously, been through the pandemic. And we all look around us across the world and see the horrible scenes that are taking place in so many conflicts, and that's tough. So how do you motivate yourself? Well, for me, when you're in a leadership position, that, so to speak, takes you a bit beyond yourself. How I see it is that I have responsibilities which it's my my duty to live up to and to carry out. And also that I do tend to think that adversity and difficulty can bring out the best in people. During the pandemic, I was frequently working, I don't know, 18 hours a day. I mean, it was busier during the pandemic sometimes than it even is the rest of the time. But I found that I was sustained by the fact that I had a most wonderful team around me who were also being incredibly supportive. And I think a lot of one's own motivation must come from one's inner values and one's desire to do something for the public good, as I said in my talk. But I also think it comes from seeking to build around you a team that will challenge you, but will also be supportive. So I found that during that time and since then, since I've been principal here, I've worked to build up a team of people who are complementary to my own skill set. And I think that's quite an important point. If you get to the position in life where you're building a team, don't always surround yourself with people who are just like you. I like to have people who work with me, who challenge and indeed motivate me because they think differently from the way that I do. And I enjoy the iterative relationship that I have with people who see the world very differently, because sometimes it's really helpful for me to see it from their point of view. So keep in mind the public good, that's what you're here for. Sustain a really good team and be prepared even when it's difficult to take on a challenge.
Thank you so much. This question is from Muhammad Abdullah. He's chemistry student at AUB. What was a pivotal moment in your personal journey which shaped your outlook on life?
Wow, that's a huge question. So, all right, I'll tell you what was a really pivotal moment for me, which absolutely shaped my views. So, as I think I mentioned in my talk, I became a fellow of an Oxford college when I was relatively young. And the nature of having a fellowship at Oxford essentially means that you could stay in the same job for the rest of your life, because it's a job for life unless you do something terrible. And I enjoyed my job, I enjoyed the teaching, I enjoyed the research, but I found myself thinking, is there something else out there? And as I briefly mentioned, in 2006, I got the opportunity to be one of the university's proctors. And what that job means is that it gives you a job where you have a responsibility across the university. You are a tribune of the people for a year, and you are allowed to be on any university committee to understand how the university works. You sit in the same building as the Vice-Chancellor, and you are there to play back to the Vice-Chancellor how, as it were, the common people in the university are feeling about how the university is being run. And I found that job a complete eye-opener. You do it for a year and then you go back to your standard job. But during that year, I saw from the inside how my university worked, how it was run, how it was financed. I saw the difficult choices it had to make. And for me, this was life-changing, because I thought I would like to contribute more to that. I could just carry on in my college role, doing the things I've been doing for the past 15 years, but actually I would like to do something more. So at that point, that was a fork in the road for me. I had the opportunity to carry on doing what I'd always been doing and could do for the rest of my life, or the opportunity to challenge myself and say, and I've indicated this was harder as a woman, that I wanted to get into university leadership roles, which would give me the opportunity to play more of a part in that big, prestigious institution. And that was what I decided to do.
Thank you. This question is coming from Christophe Kaitanjian. Hopefully I said his last name correctly. Due to the limited time, the task at hand involves selecting the most appropriate plan. And I'd like to know how to track it, how to have a plan.
How to have a plan? Yeah, that's a great question. So thank you, Christophe. So the first thing is, what's the nature of the task that you've got? Okay, so you set yourself the exam question. What is the task that I'm trying to address? And then you think, what am I trying to achieve, right? What do I want to get out of this? What is the aim? What am I being asked to do? And then the plan is how you get from where you are to where you want to be. And a plan takes a certain amount of thought and discipline, and it doesn't just have to be something that only you can participate in. As I've indicated, I frequently arrive at my plan through the process of iteration. This is partly the way I was taught when I was an undergraduate. I believe in Socratic dialogue. I think that you get to a keener statement of what your plan is if you tension it, if you talk to other people about it. So I'm a great believer in saying, right, this is where we need to get to. How are we going to get here? This is my idea. Right, and I'll say to my colleagues, okay, let's knock this around a bit. So debate, discussion is very important to finalising a plan, but ultimately, in my view, and particularly if you're in a leadership position, you have to own that plan at the end of it. You have to feel this is right, this is the right thing to do. So I mentioned the pandemic, which I think is a very good example. I had to take a lot of, as the institutional lead, I had to take a lot of very difficult decisions during the pandemic, and occasionally they were life or death decisions as to, are we going to encourage our students to go home, or are we going to say that we're going to keep them here in St. Andrews? They were very big choices that we had to make at certain points. And so I would sit down with my team and say, we need to plan. This is the choice that we've got. This is what I think. Now let's go back and forth with it. And on occasion, I would listen to the arguments and I would change my mind. So my plan would change. And I think you need to have the flexibility to change your plan if the arguments presented suggest that you should do that. But it's crucial, finally, to own that plan and make sure that you feel that it is yours.
Thank you. This question is from Adam Sarhal, a biology student here at AUB. He said, I encountered a quote by Helmut von Moltke, and the quote is, no plan survives contact with the enemy. End of quote. In this context, should plans be flexible? What is the first thing that you do if it fails?
Yes, that's great, isn't it? No plan survives contact with the enemy. I don't actually agree with that myself. I think that good plans do survive contact with the enemy. Though I'm not sure how helpful it is always to think of plans as involving the enemy, or indeed to think of the world as involving the enemy. Sometimes it does, sometimes it involves people who disagree with you. That's different. That's not the enemy. A plan can, now, what do you do if a plan fails? Well, first of all, you need to be sure that it has failed. So you need to be sure what you think that failure means. This is a brilliant question, I think. Sometimes a plan takes longer to achieve than you thought it was going to. That doesn't actually mean it has failed. It just means that it's taken longer than you thought it was going to. Sometimes a plan really doesn't work because you try to do something and it doesn't work out for all sorts of reasons. And this, I have to say, this has of course happened to me, that I've had a plan and I've realized that it's not working out. If it doesn't work out, and I would always say doesn't work out as opposed to failure, and I'm going to come back to this point about failure in a minute. If it doesn't work out, first thing you do is sit down and analyze, and you work out why it hasn't worked out, and you're honest with yourself and your colleagues about that. And that is the learning process, so that next time you plan, you can improve it. And I think that's absolutely crucial. You know, you have to learn from the things that don't work. So I'm going to say something that some people regard as controversial here, which is, I do think there's a sort of culture at the moment which goes on about it's all right to fail, it's good to fail, etc. And I'm really not sure that I agree with that, and I'm not totally sure that I agree with giving that sort of license to fail. For me, that doesn't completely compute. I think we learn from making mistakes. I see very little that's positive in identifying that as failure. I don't think that helps people. So I think there's a real difference between, you know, how do you cope with failure and how do you cope with something not working out? To me, that's much better because that suggests you're on a process, whereas failure suggests that just hasn't worked out at all. We've got to take it away and completely regroup. In my experience of life, rarely is it like that, that something works out so completely that you have to jettison it totally. More often, it hasn't worked on this occasion. Let's take it away and make it better. And far more times than not, I've seen things get taken away, refined, revised, refreshed, made better, and then they work.
Thank you very much. This question is coming from Professor Fan Meng Fang. He is from the National University of Singapore. Thank you, Professor Fang, for joining us from Singapore. His question is, what are some suggestion evidence-based strategies to engender equity and gender in academic today to balance the situation?
Yes, great question, Professor Fong. And sometimes, you know, in my view, you need to make interventions to move things along, and those need to be strategic and they need to be well chosen. But sometimes these interventions can be very necessary. I'm going to give you two examples. One of them takes us back. I mentioned the Athena Swan gender scheme for promoting women and advancing the cause of women. So this had been around in the UK for quite some time. And then in 2011, something very dramatic happened, that Professor Dame Sally Davis, who was then a very significant person on one of the medical research councils, wrote a very public letter which was about the allocation of medical research funding. And she wrote it round to the deans of medicine in all the medical schools in the UK, saying, I've just been carrying out the latest application rounds in relation to the allocation of medical funding in this particular area. And frankly, I was really appalled by the small numbers of women involved in the attitudes to gender equality. So I'm going to make it very clear that any department applying for funding under this particular scheme in future, after 2 years' time, will have to have an Athena Swan Silver Award, otherwise we're not going to consider it. And this was a massive intervention. Almost overnight, it turned this scheme, which was about gender equality, which was often treated by institutions something sort of local and nice to have, into something that institutions had to have because it was associated with resource. And I remember I was in the personnel role in Oxford at the time, and I started getting text messages from our Dean of Medicine, who'd never shown that much interest in Athena Swan Awards before then, saying, how do we get an Athena Swan Platinum Award? He didn't just want silver or gold, he wanted platinum, which didn't actually exist. But that degree of, as it were, sort of exaggeration was a response to the fact that an improvement in equality was being associated with resource. So sometimes you actually have to make an intervention that links equality up with something that will really impact on an institution. In my own institution, for example, when I arrived, I was struck by the fact that we would still on occasion shortlist people for posts, and we would have a shortlist that was entirely composed of one gender. So I simply said that I took the view that with our approaches to selection and appointment, that henceforth, if we got to the point where applications for academic posts brought out a shortlist that only had one gender in it, we would stop the process and look again until we were absolutely sure that there weren't any women or men, dependent, who were capable of being shortlisted, to ensure that we absolutely were giving this the attention that we should and that unconscious bias was not playing a key part. So I think the message that you need to take from that, or that I take from that, is that on occasion you need to make strategic pointed interventions, sometimes absolutely associating resource with them if you really want to change the dial and move things on.
Thank you so much. We have around 10 more minutes, Professor Mapstone.
Sure.
to stay within the 1 hour?
Yeah.
Can you take a couple more questions?
Yeah, with great pleasure.
Thank you so much. This question is from Dr. Ola Azzain. She is the head of the medical library here at AUB. Thank you for a fantastic and inspiring talk. Her question is, what is the role of the man figure in a journey of such a successful woman, both positively and negatively, to get to where you are today?
Oh, what a brilliant question that is. What is the role of the man figure? Well, there've been lots of men figures across my lifetime of one sort and another, from whom I've learned a great deal. And I would say that I think some of the most enlightened and diversity-informed people I know are men. When I was at Oxford, I worked under a series of male vice-chancellors, from all of whom I think I learned a great deal, actually, about a whole range of how to do things, if you like. But I think that one of the most important roles for men has been and continues to be appreciating the fact that we still do not operate on an equal playing field in very many ways. And we have improved hugely. We've come on a long way, I think, in many parts of the world and in many societies during my lifetime. But we do not yet experience equality across the piece. And I mean this in relation to race and ethnicity, and disability, as much as I mean in relation to gender, though obviously we've talked a lot about gender today. And so I think it's incredibly important that men who often still are, almost without realizing it, in positions of power and privilege, take that on board and think it through whether they're interacting with the rest of us. I have experienced that wonderful sense of engagement with many of the men that I've worked with, but absolutely not all of them. And that's just something that we have to acknowledge about the world we live in and strive to make it better still.
This question is from Sinju Moon. He is chemistry majoring student here at AUB. In your opinion, what is the most important opportunity that universities offer to students, especially undergrads, that is beyond academic, on which we should focus on?
Yeah, what a smashing question. So I'm going to answer that actually in terms of entrepreneurialism, because in my lifetime as an academic, I think one of the most dramatic ways in which I've seen universities change and sort of open up and open their doors is by encouraging entrepreneurialism, both as a mindset and in terms of what they actually offer their students. Entrepreneurialism doesn't have to mean being commercial, but it is about looking at the translation of your knowledge into environments beyond the university. And that's one of the ways in which we connect up what we do at university with what we then may go on to do in life. And increasingly, I think that universities rightly perceive themselves as having a huge responsibility to try to set up those connections in a way that can make students more employable, but also gives them the flexibility, the capacity to draw connections in a way that can really assist them throughout their lives. So many universities these days incorporate entrepreneurialism both in their teaching and in the extracurricular opportunities that they provide for their students. We have an entrepreneurial centre at my university, which is hugely popular with undergraduates, postgraduate research students, postdocs, and so many universities do this. So I think the capacity to encourage the translation of ideas into different contexts is a crucial responsibility of universities, and very much a 21st century one.
Thank you. What is your input on integrating technology in education? This question is coming from Lynn Zoghbi, a chemistry student here at AUB. So what is your input on integrating technology in education, and how do you believe new educational technological advances can positively or negatively impact teaching and research?
Okay, so first of all, it's helpful to know that I'm a medievalist, and I say this because my academic research has concentrated a lot on what was happening in the 15th century when people started moving from reading everything in manuscript to experience it in print. That was a major revolution, as big as what we're discovering with AI. It transformed what people read, how they read it, who read it. So the emergence of printing in the 15th century in Europe was a revolution that changed universities dramatically over the next century. So I think what I'm partly saying is, we've been here before. This is why I talk about universities as having longevity and needing to reinvent themselves. So tech has come to dominate our lives. It even dominates my research area, which is, an arcane part of medieval studies. Why? Because now we've got data sets and the capacity through digital to see things that my research used to take me sort of 18 months to go to, go and work in the Vatican Library, transcribe manuscripts, come back. Now I can sort of look at those manuscripts digitally in an afternoon. So the tech has hugely changed the way we work in every discipline. It's enabled us to look at data and work with data at a level and at a scale that even 10 years ago was inconceivable. This then very rapidly takes us into the area of AI, and I imagine that this may lie behind your question. And all universities at the moment are looking really hard at how they and their students work with large language models, how that affects how they study, how that affects how they are assessed, how it affects the ethics of how they actually talk about what they themselves produce. This is a wonderful challenge. It is not something that we should be frightened of, and it is not something that, to use a slightly medieval analogy, we should see ourselves like King Canute trying to stop the tide from coming in. The tide is going to come in. We need actually to make the most of that. So I think, I would be a billionaire if I could work out how tech was most relevantly going to transform our existence at universities. But what I do know is that it is going to change how we research, how we teach, how we assess, and how we live our lives. And that we are going to have to be careful about that, but that we should also embrace it. So tech is already a huge part of our lives. It's going to become more so. I'm the generation that grew up before the internet, so I've seen the kind of, the radical way in which that has transformed lives. And if I put it all in the balance, I would have to say that I think it's been on balance beneficial, but we have to learn the lessons. And the same will be true of what happens with tech in our universities in the future.
Two more questions, if you don't mind.
I'll be quick.
Dr. Yvonne Cho from Xiamen University in Malaysia. As you can see, we have attendees from all over the world. His question: career transitions aren't always part of the plan, yet taking the leap of faith in some of these unplanned journeys might bring us somewhere interesting in life. Did you by any chance encounter such transitions in your career that you could share a little more with us?
Yeah, and I think that's actually quite right. That sometimes you have to take the leap of faith, and that's partly why I put in that quote from Iris Murdoch, because what she's talking about is having the outlines of a plan and then allowing your imagination to take off and to take you somewhere different. And I think I have certainly seen that. For instance, I would say that was what enabled me 7 or 8 years ago to leave Oxford, where I could happily have spent the whole of my academic career, and come to St Andrews, because I had planned my life as a series of challenges to myself, where I would go into areas that were going to be difficult for me. When I started working, I'm an academic in literature, and when I took on the personnel and equality role at Oxford, I had to find out about pensions, which I really had never interested me, but now I'm quite an expert on the subject. I've persistently challenged myself. And then when the opportunity to be considered for the role that I now have at St Andrews, leading the institution, came up, it was a leap of faith for me, because I was putting myself from somewhere where I was very comfortable to somewhere where I had no idea if it would really work out. But my plan had always been to keep setting myself challenges that fitted with where I'd been before. So I actually think the best leaps of faith come when you've got a firm base and you take that leap with a sense of where you might be going. Now, you could end up somewhere completely different. But the leap of faith, it's the faith point that's important. It's not an abstract leap where you don't know where you're going. It's a leap because you've got faith in something, and that faith should be in part in yourself.
And the last question is from Dr. Iman Sbaiti. Dr. Sbaiti is the first female surgeon to work here at AUB, to be hired at AUB. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you for such an inspiring discussion from a woman who succeeded to break the glass ceiling effect. How do you view the current role of scientific women associations, and what should they do to become more active in promoting women?
Yes, and I appreciate what lies behind that question. It does help if women promote other women. That's one of the great things that women can do, actually, is to recognize that saying that it matters and that it helps and that it offers role models and to have more women engaged in fields where they have not been engaged before is a very important statement to make and thing to do. This is about broadening the base of people who can contribute in an incredibly important area like science and like medicine. So why wouldn't we want to do that? Is basically what, for me, it comes down to. And we will all encounter cultural barriers of one sort and another, but showing your worth, making common cause, and having both courage and humility, these are all the things that have worked for me. But I've also found throughout my life, I've found it very helpful to make common cause with others. So joining up with other women who feel the way you do, establishing a kind of sisterhood, having what in the 1970s were called consciousness raising groups. All of those things can make a real difference because you feel you're not on your own, you are supported. So start with that faith that we've just been talking about, that inner belief, but then find the people who share it with you. They will be there and they will support you. And by making common cause and by really enhancing and extending the capacity of your voice, you're even more likely to be heard, noticed, and then finally appreciated.
Thank you so much, Professor Dame Mapstone, for this beautiful mentoring talk and for honoring us with your presence. I know how busy you are. Congratulations to Amy again. Amy has played a pivotal role in
Yes, she has.
making this mentoring talk work. I also want to thank somebody you might remember, Dr. Sonia Mayer-Atassi, whom you actually hosted in your beautiful home overlooking a beautiful lake. That's what Sonia told me. And she is actually attending right now. We are featuring female presidents of universities this year for mentoring talks. And when I sent my announcement for the previous mentoring talk, president of Columbia University, she wrote to me that I should invite you. And that's how it happened.
That's how it happened. Well, hi there. Thank you so much for that. And I feel all the more honoured to have had this opportunity. And I do want to express my gratitude for the wonderful questions that have been put to me. Generous, intelligent, informed, and full of hope and optimism. And that's what we should be encouraging. So thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been the high point of my month thus far. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope we will have the chance to host you here and in our beautiful campus at AUB in the future. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for everybody to stay till now with us. And until our next mentoring talk, which will be by the president-elect of Boston University, Professor Melissa Gilliam. She is gonna take office on July 1st, and we are gonna be hosting her for the 31st mentoring talk on September 5. 2024. Thank you again, Professor Dame Sally Mapstone, for this inspiring mentoring talk. Until our next mentoring talk, everybody, so long. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.